Gabe Madsen is an absolute flamethrower.
Said it, I'm golden. Told you I'm shining. Had to break through. Plan perfect timing. Giving no hands. Go get it. Radix the ruler. Can't with them peasants. Want to win pleasant. Envy the essence. Fuck about you. More about me. I come from.
Last week, the Miami Heat signed 4 new players to Exhibit 10 contracts to complete their 21-person training camp roster. I've already made videos discussing Dane Danger and Jameer Young and Trevor Keels. So today, I want to finally highlight the last new signee who might just be the Heat's next Duncan Robinson. And while the Heat are sitting there stacking up talent, the Dolphins certainly are not. Which is why my favorite bet on FanDuel right now is the Buffalo Bills minus 12.5 for Thursday Night Football. FanDuel was so gracious to have this lineup almost immediately after the Dolphins-Patriots game. And if you saw that game, or at least my recap of it, you should know that the Bills are about to do ungodly things to the Miami Dolphins on Thursday night. So make sure to go on FanDuel, get that line in before it shifts even more in the Bills' favor. But back to Gabe Madsen. The 24-year-old guard is 6'6", 200 pounds, so definitely has a nice frame to him. Similar to Duncan Robinson, I think Duncan was about 6'7", 6'8", and obviously having that kind of height as a shooter is always helpful in getting your shot off, especially when you have a super quick release like Gabe Madsen does. Had a pretty decent college career, started off at Cincinnati where he played only 2 games before opting out for COVID and some personal reasons. But after that, he did put his name in the transfer portal before ending up at Utah, where he would spend his final 4 seasons, seeing his points per game increase pretty much every single year, but there was a lot of variance in his efficiency. As a super senior, he did average a pretty decent 15 points per game, but the field goal percentage left a lot to be desired. Was 37% from the field and 32% from 3 on 10 attempts, which is nothing short of awful. If I had to pick one adjective to describe that, it would be Terry Rozier-ness. That's how bad those numbers kind of are. Except Terry actually was probably worse last year. But anyways, 10 attempts from 3 is a lot. And if you're only hitting 32% of those, that's not that great. But he was a lot better his prior year, where he shot about 7 threes a game at 39%. So there is a large sample size of him taking a lot of threes and shooting them well. He just had a little bit of a rough senior season for some reasons that we'll get into a little bit later. But he's definitely not shy of letting the long ball go. He even had a game his super senior season where he shot 22 threes in a game. 22 threes. Oh man, that would be a dream of mine to get 22 threes up in a game. And funny enough, the game in which Gabe Madsen did that last year was against his former school in Cincinnati. So maybe he had some beef over there and kind of wanted to show out, and he was okay. I mean, he made 8 of his 22 three-pointers, so it wasn't anything special or anything, but he's not afraid to get him up. And that's something that I definitely like a lot. We know in Spo's system, he always gives all the shooters a neon green light and gets mad when they don't shoot, gets mad when they pass up shots. I don't think Gabe Madsen's going to be a guy who's going to pass up a lot of shots. And I mean, of his 13 shots he took last year, 10 of them were three-pointers. So obviously the guy is very clearly a sniper. He's actually Utah's all-time leader in three-pointers made. Not that Utah is a huge school or anything like that. The only current players from that school in the NBA right now is Kyle Kuzma, Jakob Poeltl, and then, funny enough, Pelle Larsson, something that I actually didn't know myself. Of course, when you think of Pelle, you think of his days at Arizona, but he did play 1 season at Utah before transferring, and unfortunately, the year that Pelle left Utah is the year that Gabe Madsen transferred to Utah. So there wasn't any crossover there, but just funny coincidence nonetheless. Unlike the few other new guards that we talked about in Jameer Young and Trevor Keels, Gabe Madsen doesn't have any G League experience, so we mostly have to rely on his college film. but he did play in this previous summer league with the Golden State Warriors. In 4 games there, he averaged 10 points per night and only 13 minutes per game. So that's pretty good numbers, and he actually shot blazing hot from 3. He was 59% from beyond the arc on 4 attempts. So, of course, that's a small sample size, but it was nice to see the last game film that we saw of Gabe Madsen was very hot shooting compared to his senior season in college. And he definitely did get hot. Even had a game in Summer League where he had 18 points in 8 first half minutes. I think he was like 6 of 7 from 3. So he's a guy that can definitely light him up. That's the strength of his shooting. That is the reason why the Heat signed him to that Exhibit 10 contract. We've talked a lot about how they really didn't have the next shooter in the pipeline like they had for many years, from Duncan Robinson to Max Strus to Cole Swider. On the Summer League team, there wasn't really anybody that impressed me from a shooting standpoint. Javonte Cook had a couple nice games. Eric Stevenson did as well. But I wouldn't say any of those guys are flamethrowers. And Gabe Madsen definitely has that kind of potential. Unlike the other new guards that we've been talking about, Jahmir Young, more of a slasher playmaker, and Trevor Keels, who is definitely a better shooter than Jahmir Young. There's still some questions there in terms of his efficiency, and I think he's more of a two-way type of guard anyways. So Madsen is without a doubt going to be the Heat's next project sniper. He's on that Exhibit 10, so even if he does get cut or doesn't get that final two-way spot that the Heat have open, he'll go to Sioux Falls where the Heat can kind of continue to develop him. And from watching his film, you can tell that he's much more than just a standalone shooter. He gets his shots in a very similar way to Duncan Robinson, where he's flying off all kind of screens. He doesn't always set his feet, but he always squares his upper body, which is a very difficult skill to have as a shooter, and also a very important one. I noticed how on almost all of his threes, he fades away, whether he's fading back or fading to the left or fading to the right. And a lot of that is because he's doing all these movements off the catch in which he's running around screens. So his momentum is sort of carrying his body, but he's able to square up his upper half and finish like we saw Duncan Robinson do a ton. And that's difficult for a shooter. You know, he has a super quick release too, so he will be able to get shots off in NBA as well. I have no doubt about that. And I also like how visually he kind of looks like Mike Miller a little bit. The long hair, even though Gabe's hair is a little bit longer. The tattoos, even though Gabe Madsen has a little more tattoos. The headband, although he has a thicker headband than Mike Miller. So he's almost like an exaggerated physical version of Mike Miller. And of course, they're both white, which is really the main comparison there. But I do like how they look similar visually. And in addition to his shooting, I did read some good things about his work ethic and Heat culture mentality as well. Here's what his Utah coach, Craig Smith, had to say about him. He said, "Gabe is so consumed with basketball. He's a gym rat, a basketball junkie," which are kind of terms we always hear thrown around about white boys. But I think his coach actually means it, because he goes on to say he'll work his hands to the bone to get better. Gabe gets in the gym 5 mornings a week to put himself through his own routine that includes daily weightlifting. He is one of those guys who wants to be at practice, wants to lift, wants to condition, wants to do yoga, wants to go to the training table, and wants to be coached and coached hard. And when he's in the games, teams have to account for him. Teams game plan to take him away. Does that not sound like a Heat culture guy? A guy who wants to be coached and coached hard? A guy who is obsessed with conditioning? Those are just all the qualities that I really like to hear about someone coming into this Heat program, as they still try to transition back to bringing Heat culture back and turning it again from just a dumb marketing scheme of what it's been these last few years to something that actually means something. And they're going to keep doing that with guys like Davion Mitchell and Drew Smith and Gabe Madsen potentially as well. I also liked how the coach mentioned that teams are game planning against him. And we saw the same thing with Duncan Robinson. Like, where do you think that Duncan Robinson to Bam Adebayo play sort of started? Teams used to commit so hard to Duncan Robinson when he would get a little handoff or would catch the ball behind the three-point line. That's when we used to always talk back in the day about Duncan's gravity. He used to draw 2, sometimes 3 defenders off the catch because teams were so scared of letting him get his shot off. They would literally game plan to not let him get his shots off. And of course, that's how Duncan was able to adjust and find all these other guys wide open. So if we're talking about Gabe Madsen as a guy who potentially could have a similar type of gravity one day, I think that is something that is very important to hear about. And I also did read that Gabe actually put 15 pounds on while at Utah, which again goes to show his hard work in the strength and conditioning room really did pay off. So he's got decent size, about 6'6", 200 pounds. So, he'll be able to kind of body in the NBA a little bit, maybe against some smaller guards. But in terms of his defense, I'm not sure that he'll ever be laterally quick enough to sort of stay with most people in the league or even be a solid on-ball defender. To his credit, I did see he averaged a steal a game as a super senior, actually led Utah in steals that year. But he doesn't really need to be a great defender or even a solid one. He just needs to be okay. He needs to be better than what Cole Swider was. Because when you look at Cole Swider, that guy was a sniper. He shot like 50% from three on super high volume in the G League, but could barely get NBA reps just because his defense was so bad. So if Gabe Madsen can kind of get the shooting percentages back up and be serviceable on the defensive end, then he's definitely a guy that could find himself in an NBA rotation potentially one day. The poor efficiency that he had as a super senior, it doesn't personally scare me a ton because his shot selection was very difficult most of the time. I was browsing the internet while researching a little bit, and I found some Reddit posts from some Utah fans who watched him play every day, and they weren't really blaming him for his efficiency because they basically said that Utah team was so bad, he was forced to create his own looks, and because of that, he was taking a lot of difficult shots, hence the poor shot selection. Which makes sense. His game is a catch and shooter. He's not a guy who's supposed to create his own shots or rely on his dribble. So if he doesn't have anyone to set him up, then that makes sense why his efficiencies would be down. And I'd only imagine that he would be better playing next to NBA talent and next to a true point guard, which the Heat really still don't even have a true point guard, I guess. But I don't know, maybe it's Kasparis. It'll be fun to watch Kasparis and Gabe Madsen bounce off each other in the preseason, so I am looking forward to that. So I think Gabe has the potential to be a really fun player to watch, but based off the new guards that we discussed in the last several videos, I still think Trevor Keels probably has the best chance to get that final two-way spot, just because he is kind of the best of both worlds. He can shoot, he can score in multiple areas, and he's by far the best defender out of the new guards that the Heat signed. But we'll find out more as training camp is now less than a month away, where, by the way, you can still get Miami to make the playoffs on FanDuel at -110, which I think is great odds. FanDuel actually projects the Miami Heat to miss the playoffs. They don't know. They haven't learned. So make sure you go on FanDuel, get in now before the Heat get off to a hot start in the regular season, and that line changes a little bit more. But that's all I got to say for this video. Let me know your thoughts down below on Gabe Madsen. Maybe drop a player comp for him. And who do you think gets that final two-way spot for the Miami Heat? I'm very curious to hear what y'all think. That being said, like the video and subscribe because all your support is greatly appreciated. And I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace out, everyone.
Look, pull up in your city, tryna get that dead face. Do it on my own, I don't need no dead weight. Had to kill him off, yeah, I need a head space. You know this homegrown bitch don't offend me.